Halloween in the morgue is never quiet. Morticians know the dead don't always rest. Some whisper, some move, and some bring horrors that should never see the light. Welcome to Whispers After Dark, where shadows speak and the night listens. Tonight, we bring you 5 chilling true tales from the mortuary, told by those who keep watch over the dead. Haunted chambers oozing secrets, and bodies that refuse to stay still. Whether you believe them or not is up to you. Me, I believe. If you're new here, please leave us a comment so YouTube will show our content to more viewers. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss the horrors waiting for you every week. Do you believe in zombies? I didn't. I thought they were only stories, cheap horror for late night movies. The police said it was an accident. 7 squatters were found dead together in an abandoned warehouse. But that night, the morgue filled with bodies that refused to stay still. It didn't help that the night they arrived was dark and stormy. Lightning clawed the sky. And to make matters worse, the building I worked in had once been a Gothic church that someone had converted into a morgue. It was a setting straight out of a horror movie. This isn't a movie. This is the zombie virus. It's real, and I was there when it began. They arrived after midnight, brought in on stretchers by 2 exhausted officers who wouldn't meet my eyes. Rain dripped from their coats, pooling on the tiles, carrying in the stink of mildew and smoke. They said the men had been found together in the warehouse, huddled in a corner around a dead propane heater. Carbon monoxide, they told me. That was the official story. But when I unzipped the first bag, I knew something was wrong. The man's skin was gray and mottled, shot through with black veins that spread across his chest like roots clawing through dirt. His lips were blue, cracked. His eyes, still half open, had that glassy cloud, but there was no slackness, no softness in the face. It looked like he had been caught mid-scream and frozen there. The others were the same. Their blood was thick and sluggish, darker than it should have been, clinging to my gloves like tar. I told myself it didn't matter. My job wasn't to ask questions. My job was to tag the dead, record what I found, and keep the cold rooms full. I slid them into their drawers, one by one, listening to the steel doors seal shut. For a while, the morgue was quiet again. But around 3 in the morning, the quiet broke. The first sound was faint. A low scrape. Metal on metal, slow and steady, like something being dragged from the inside. I froze, listening. Then came another, then another. Drawers sliding open one by one until the sound echoed through the corridor like a row of teeth being pulled. When I opened the door to storage 2, the lights flickered overhead. The drawers all hung open, every one of them. The bodies lay half exposed, pale arms dangling, mouths open. And then I swear, one of the chests shifted. Just a small rise, a faint imitation of breath. My skin went cold. I shoved the drawer shut, slammed the latch, and tried to convince myself I'd imagined it. The next morning, I came back to find the drawers wide again. One of the bodies was stretched out on the autopsy table, arms stiff at its sides, head turned toward my chair as if it had been waiting for me. Another was on the floor, mouth gaping, black saliva crusting at the edges. Every night, it got worse. The bodies moved when I wasn't looking. Sometimes I found them standing together at the end of the corridor, shoulder to shoulder, eyes rolled white and glassy. Once, while I leaned over my paperwork, I heard the creak of leather straps tightening, and when I looked up, one of the corpses was sitting up on the gurney, wrists twitching against restraints that weren't there. And then they began to move while I watched. The first twitched fingers, nails tapping against steel. Another's head rolled, mouth cracking open with a wet pop. Their legs jerked, stiff and uneven, dragging across the drawers. And then their eyes, all 7, rolled toward me at once. The door slammed shut behind me, the lock turning with a sharp metallic snap. My breath caught in my chest. Their movements were jerky, puppet-like but relentless. Feet slapped against the tile as they pulled themselves upright, mouths opening wider, spilling wet rasps that sounded like broken whistles. I don't remember unlocking the door. One moment they were closing in, and the next I was outside in the storm, rain soaking my scrubs, lungs burning as I staggered into the street. The next morning, the morgue was sealed. Boards nailed across the doors, chains wrapped tight around the handles. A notice taped crookedly to the wall, condemned. But it didn't end there. Weeks later, I read a paragraph buried in the local paper. 3 officers from the night those bodies arrived had vanished. Their squad car was found abandoned on a back road, doors open, headlights still burning. Blood streaked across the gravel led into the woods, but no one followed it. Morticians whisper, but not about this. No one wants to believe a virus could raise the dead, even for a few minutes. But I know what I saw. Months later, long after I thought I'd buried the memory, I saw a post online. It was pulled down within hours, but not before I read it. A paramedic in another state claimed their unit had responded to what was called a gas leak in an abandoned hotel. Dozens of bodies, all dead in their rooms. But when they reached the morgue, the same thing happened. The drawers wouldn't stay shut, and the corpses began to move. By the next morning, the entire thread was gone. Every link dead, every cached page erased. A new headline replaced it in the local paper. No fatalities in hotel gas leak. All clear. But the comments told a different story. Families who never saw their loved ones again. Police reports sealed. Witnesses who suddenly went silent. The feds covered it up. They always do. I never told anyone until now. Because if I stayed quiet, the story would vanish with me, and no one would ever know the truth about what was brought out of that warehouse. I know this for sure. The dead don't always stay dead. Sometimes they get back up. Do you believe certain places are cursed? I didn't. I thought talk of ley lines and energy fields was just folklore. But the morgue I work in was built over something ancient, and I've seen what seeps through. This is the morgue on the Ley Line. The hospital above me has been abandoned for decades. Once it was an asylum, the kind of place that left no records, no headstones, no dignity for the people locked inside. Families were told their loved ones were cared for. The truth was they were hidden away, experimented on, forgotten. When the state finally learned what had been happening, the asylum was shuttered, the halls stripped bare, and the wards left to rot. But the basement was different. The basement was left standing, untouched, because the morgue had its own outside entrance. It was convenient, separate. And in a town that didn't ask questions, it kept working. The hospital above crumbled to dust, but the morgue below stayed cold, stayed alive. I wish I'd known then what I know now, that the asylum wasn't built there by accident. It was built on a ley line, a seam of energy cutting through the earth like a buried vein. People claim ley lines are just stories, but here in this place they've split something open. At night, the air tastes metallic, thick and sharp, like old pennies pressed against your tongue. The walls sweat, condensation running in thin rivulets that sometimes trace symbols on the tiles. The hum of the refrigeration units turns strange, bending and warping until it feels like voices underneath, layered in whispers too low to understand. There are nights when I hear footsteps in the upper halls, the asylum wards that no one has walked in for 50 years, bare feet slapping against broken linoleum, chains rattling where no chains should be. When I go up to check, I find dust undisturbed, doors sealed with rust. But the air is wrong. It's heavier, electric, as if something unseen had just stepped out of the room before I arrived. The morgue itself feels worse. Storage chambers slam open even when I've locked them tight. The bodies inside don't decay as quickly as they should. Their skin stays too pale, their mouths too slack, as if waiting to speak. I've woken from naps at my desk to see one of the corpses sitting up on the gurney, eyes open, staring. When I blink, they're flat again, but the sheet clings to them in shapes it shouldn't. as though something else is sharing the body. And there are smells: sulfur, wet rot, a sweet copper tang that coats the back of my throat. Sometimes the smell comes before the lights flicker, and when the shadows lurch across the walls, they don't always settle back where they belong. 2 weeks ago, while transferring a body to Storage 5, I heard a sound like tearing fabric. Not cloth, something deeper. The crack of dimensions splitting. The overhead lights burst, glass raining down as a cold wind poured through the room. And then I saw it. A fissure in the wall, black and slick, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. From inside, a hand pressed forward. Not flesh, not bone. A shape darker than shadow, with fingers too long and thin, nails scraping across the tile as if it were reaching for me. I shoved the body inside, slammed the drawer, and ran. For hours I sat outside in the rain, breathing hard, trying to tell myself I hadn't seen it. But the smell clung to my clothes, sulfur and iron and something older, something wrong. Since that night, things have only worsened. Bodies shift during the day. Drawers stand open when I return. The whispers are louder now, no longer muffled. They call me by name. They promise things I don't want to understand. And sometimes, when the air pressure drops and the temperature plummets, I swear I can hear the screams of the asylum patients still trapped here, clawing at the veil, begging to be let through. The Ley Line is a wound. The asylum was a mistake, and the morgue is no longer just a place for the dead. It's a doorway. I haven't told anyone. Who would believe me? They'd say I've been alone too long, that the shadows and silence have rotted my mind. But I know better. The dead here are restless, and something else moves among them, something the asylum woke, and the Ley Line still feeds. I kept it quiet until now, because silence seems safer. But the more I hold it in, the louder the whispers get. That's why you're hearing it. Because if I took this secret to my grave, the things behind that crack would keep clawing, and one night they'll find a way through. Do you believe the earth itself can bleed? I didn't. I thought a crack in the basement wall was just age and settling stone. But in the morgue at Ashcombe, black ooze seeped through, and it reanimated the dead. This is the crack in the wall. I've worked in a lot of small towns, but none stranger than Ashcombe, tucked high in the mountains where the fog seems to never lift. People there whisper about odd lights on the ridges, animals disappearing, and shadows that move against the tree line. When I took the position as Mortician in their tiny morgue, I thought I'd heard every tall tale mountain folk could spin. But the truth is, strange is the usual here. And sometimes, strange gets worse. The building itself was old, patched together with red brick and gray stone, sagging into the hillside like it wanted to sink back into the earth. In the basement, the foundation walls bore cracks like scars. One night, while checking inventory, I noticed a long fissure running from the ceiling to the floor. From it seeped something I couldn't quite place. Thick, black, and glistening. It oozed slow like tar. It smelled faintly metallic, like blood mixed with oil. I should have panicked, but I didn't. I figured it was just groundwater pulling minerals through the wall. I called a contractor from town. He came down with his flashlight, ran a hand along the crack, and shook his head. "Harmless," he said. "The ground shifts here. Nothing to worry about." He patched it, sealed it, and charged me cash. By the time he left, I'd nearly convinced myself he was right. Nearly. A week later, I found the same substance again. Only this time it wasn't leaking from the wall. It was dripping from a drain pipe in storage room B, the one where we keep the overflow of bodies. I remember the first droplet hitting the floor with a wet plunk. The sound echoed in the silence. When I bent down, the ooze was thicker than before, bubbling faintly, as if alive. I tried not to breathe too deeply, because the smell burned my nose and coated the back of my throat like rot. That night, as I worked late on paperwork, I heard it, footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming from storage room B. My pen froze mid-scratch. I told myself it was pipes settling, or maybe a janitor passing through. But the footsteps didn't fade, they grew closer, metallic clicks like drawers sliding open. I grabbed my keys, shoved them in my pocket, and walked down the corridor. When I opened the door, my stomach turned. The bodies were no longer in their drawers. They lay out on the tables, pale under the buzzing fluorescent light, tags dangling from toes, eyes closed. For a long moment I just stood there, every hair on my neck stiff. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Finally I forced myself forward. One by one I returned them to their drawers. The metal clanged shut too loudly in the quiet. My hands shook as I locked the door behind me. I thought that was the end of it. But the next morning when I returned, the room was different. The drawers stood wide open, empty. The bodies were gone. My heart sank as I followed the trail. Smears of that black ooze streaked across the floor like footprints, leading into the autopsy chamber. And there they were again. Not where I'd left them, arranged in a semicircle around the table as though waiting. I told myself it was a prank, a sick, impossible prank. I slammed the door, shoved them back into their places, and left as soon as fast I could. But every night after, it happened again. The bodies moved, the ooze spread. It began dripping from the vents, the ceiling, curling into patterns across the tile. And always those sounds, the scrape of metal, the shuffle of bare feet against the floor. One night, I stayed to work late on an autopsy for a suspicious death. The air in the morgue grew cold, heavy. My lamp flickered, and then I heard it, a wet slap against the floor, followed by another and another. When I turned, I saw them, pale forms pulling themselves upright from the tables, their movements stiff, jerking like marionettes. Black ooze leaked from their mouths and eyes, running down their gowns, dripping to the floor. I backed toward the door, fumbling for my keys, but it slammed shut with a force that rattled the glass. The sound echoed in the concrete walls. I was trapped. They turned toward me in unison, heads snapping like broken dolls. Their feet dragged, leaving streaks of that oily trail as they began to move closer. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen, with their hollow eyes fixed on me. I don't know how I got out. I woke up on the ground next to my car. Maybe the door opened on its own. Maybe something else wanted me to leave, to carry the story outside these walls. All I know, I drove away as fast as I could, and thankful that I'm still here. As far as I know, whatever brought those bodies back to life is still waiting in that morgue. The crack was never just in the foundation. It was a doorway, and something came through. I tried to warn them. I reported what I'd seen to the town council, even the mayor. They laughed at me at first, called me paranoid, said the mountain air plays tricks on outsiders. But I think they believe me now. I'll never forget the look on their faces when they unlatched that door, when the things that used to be corpses lunged forward, black liquid streaming from their mouths and eyes, clawing to get out. I didn't stay to see the end. I turned away, got in my car, and drove into the night. The day I packed my belongings and loaded up my car to leave Ashcombe, I drove past the morgue one last time. The day I packed my belongings and loaded up my car to leave Ashcombe, I drove past the morgue one last time. Every window had been boarded, thick planks nailed into place as if to hold something inside. Heavy chains crossed the doors, and fresh warning signs were staked in the ground. The whole block was silent, the kind of silence that feels too deliberate, as though the town itself was trying to smother what had happened. People there don't talk about it. Not the council, not the mayor, not the families who still live in the shadow of that building. Morticians whisper in passing, then cut themselves off as though the words might follow them home. Out of sight, out of mind, that's how they survive. But I know better. I was there. I saw them move. I heard the scrape of their nails against steel. And I can't shake the thought that if the dead wanted out badly enough, no boards, no chains, no painted warnings would hold them. Months later, long after I'd left Ashcombe behind, I found a post buried on an obscure forum. The writing was scattered, panicked, like someone typing in the dark with shaking hands. They claimed the military had sealed off the town, roadblocks at every entrance, helicopters circling at night. Families were ordered to stay inside, but the truth was impossible to contain. The ooze hadn't stayed trapped in the crack beneath the morgue. It had seeped into the cemetery. They wrote about the ground swelling, graves splitting apart, as if the earth itself was being forced open from below. About coffins bursting, splintered wood littering the grass, and pale hands clawing into the moonlight. The dead were rising, not just in the morgue, but in the very soil the town had trusted to hold them. The post ended abruptly, mid-sentence, like the writer had been dragged from the keyboard. No update ever followed. The page was scrubbed days later, erased as though it had never been there. But I read it. I know what I saw, and I know Ashcombe's secret didn't stay buried. Do you believe in ghosts? I didn't. Not until the drawers stopped staying shut. Things moved, things I couldn't explain. That's when I learned the truth. Ghosts are real. This is Haunted Morgue. There are nights when the silence of the morgue feels heavier than the stone slabs I work on. Nights when the hum of the fluorescent lights falters and the shadows press in as if the walls themselves are holding their breath. I've been a mortician for nearly 20 years, and I used to think I'd seen everything. Grief, tragedy, the blank stillness of the dead. But what I've witnessed in this place, it follows me home, clinging to my clothes, whispering from the corners of my dreams. The building itself was never meant for peace. It was built in the 1940s, a squat brick warehouse on the edge of town, its windows narrow slits that never let in much light. The paint flakes from the ceiling in pale curls, and the linoleum tiles are cracked, stained with things that bleach will never erase. People come and go during the day, detectives, coroners, grieving families, but at night, I am the only heartbeat in the building. That's when the air grows colder than it should, the temperature dropping as though something unseen has entered the room. Storage 3 is the worst. The air in there has a bite, no matter how high the thermostat is turned. The refrigeration units line the wall like iron coffins, humming in perfect unison, but it's the silence between the hums that unsettles me. The bodies stored there don't look quite at peace. Their mouths hang open as if frozen mid-scream, their fingers bent into stiff claws. I avoid going in unless I have to, but sometimes the drawers open themselves, pulled out a few inches as though something inside is restless. At first I told myself fatigue was the cause. The job grinds you down after all. Long nights, harsh smells, the loneliness of working with the dead. I brushed off the little things, a missing toe tag, an instrument left in the wrong place. But one night I heard it, a faint tapping from inside one of the drawers, 3 soft knocks, then silence. My blood turned cold, but I leaned in anyway, pressing my ear to the metal. That's when I heard the whisper, hoarse, low, like someone trying to speak through a mouth full of dirt. I staggered back, slammed the drawer shut, and left the room. For weeks after, I refused to open that particular chamber. But the morgue doesn't forgive neglect. When I'm embalming, the overhead lights sometimes flicker until the shadows lurch and stretch, reaching out across the tiles. I'll glance down at my instruments only to find them rearranged, lined up in precise, unnatural patterns I never made. Circles, spirals, sometimes a shape that looks like an eye. The mirrors are worse. There's one mounted above the embalming table, meant to help with angles. But more than once I've looked up and seen the body staring back at me, its eyes wide open when I know they were sewn shut. 2 months ago, I was moving a body down the corridor when the gurney grew heavier, the wheels screaming against the floor. It felt like someone had climbed onto it, pressing down from above. My palms slicked with sweat as the sheet began to rise, swelling like something beneath was breathing. I held on, frozen, until it sagged flat again. I didn't dare unzip that bag. I rolled it into storage 3, shoved it inside, and left every light burning. The nights bleed together, but the whispers keep me company now. They curl between the lockers, soft as breath, echoing words I can almost understand. My name comes most often, spoken in voices I don't recognize, and sometimes in ones I do. My father's. A friend long gone. The voices of people who have no reason to be here. When I try to ignore them, they grow sharper, urgent, until I'm forced to answer aloud, just to quiet them. And there are other things. Wet footprints trailing across the floor when the night is still. Cold handprints smeared across the inside of glass viewing panels. Once, while I was sewing a jaw shut, I felt fingers close around my wrist, stiff and ice cold. I looked down and the corpse hadn't moved, but the bruise lingered on my skin for days, a perfect map of fingertips pressed too deep. People think morticians grow numb to death, that the work makes us immune to fear. But death here isn't silent, it's restless. The building itself feels alive, as though every cry of grief, every final breath, every secret carried in by the dead has soaked into the walls. Some nights when the wind rattles the windows, I swear I can hear screams muffled beneath the concrete floor. I haven't told anyone. Who would believe me? They'd call it stress, exhaustion, guilt from handling the forgotten. But I know the truth. The dead here are not at rest. They are waiting, watching, and every time I lock the doors behind me, I wonder if they'll let me leave when the sun rises. I kept it to myself all these years, until now. Because if I never spoke, the story of what haunts this morgue would vanish with me, and the dead would keep their secret forever. Do you believe the dead can watch you? I didn't. I thought toe tags and locked drawers kept the silence safe, until the night one body wouldn't stay shut, and its eyes began to follow me. This is the thing in the drawer. I've grown used to the sounds of the morgue, the steady hum of refrigeration, the faint click of cooling pipes, the occasional drip of condensation cooling on tile. They're the heartbeat of this place, and after years of working nights, I've learned to live with them. But there's one sound I'll never grow used to, the metallic screech of a drawer sliding open when I know I've locked it shut. The first time it happened, I was cataloging intake late at night. The building was empty, but for me and 3 new arrivals. The drawers all stood sealed, the toe tags recorded, everything neat, everything still. Then the sound cut through the silence, a long, slow scrape of metal sliding against metal. I turned, flashlight beam shaking, and saw one of the drawers gaping 2 inches open. The tag dangling from its handle swayed as though it had been pulled. I told myself I'd forgotten to close it properly. I pushed it shut, turned the latch, and went back to work. Minutes later, the sound returned, louder this time. I spun, and the drawer stood wide open, the body inside pale beneath the fluorescent light, eyes shut but face turned toward me as if it had shifted on its own. My stomach nodded, but I forced myself to slide it back in. This time I pressed my shoulder against the steel and heard the lock click home. That night, I dreamed of the drawer sliding open again. Only in the dream the body inside was sitting up, its lips moving without sound. I woke in a cold sweat, the echo of that screech still in my ears. The following week, it happened again. I was finishing an embalming when I heard the familiar scrape. The same drawer, the same body. This time, the face had changed. The eyes were wide open, staring straight ahead, clouded and glassy, but undeniably fixed on me. I dropped my tools. My legs locked in place, but I forced myself forward, slammed the drawer shut, and bolted the latch so tight it rattled. I even taped the edges closed with thick strips of duct tape. But when I came in the next morning, the tape lay shredded on the floor, and the drawer was open again. It became routine after that. No matter what I did, locks, tape, even shoving a heavy gurney in front of it, the drawer opened on its own. Always that same body. Always turned toward me, waiting. One night I decided to test it. I shut every light off, left only the glow of my desk lamp burning, and sat in silence, staring down the corridor toward storage room 2. For nearly an hour, nothing happened. Then slowly, I heard it. The scrape, the sound of metal sliding against metal. My pulse hammered as I leaned forward. The door creaked open by itself, a shadow spilling out across the floor. And then, impossibly, the toe tag began to drag along the tiles, scratching letters into the dust. By the time I reached it, the message was clear. It spelled my name. I should have left then. I should have quit, but a sick fascination kept me there. Each night I returned, and each night the drawer opened wider. The body inside began to change. Its lips cracked open as though to speak, black fluid drying at the corners. Once, when I reached to push it shut, the eyes rolled toward me. They followed me. The final night, I came in early, determined to end it. I brought chains, padlocks, anything I could think of. I wrapped the drawer shut, sealed every seam. When I was done, I leaned against the table, exhausted. That's when the air turned cold. My breath smoked, and then the chains began to rattle. Slowly at first, then violently, until the metal links snapped like twigs. The drawer blasted open with a metallic wail, and the body inside sat bolt upright, eyes locked on mine. Its jaw dropped, wider than it should, and the sound that poured out wasn't human. I ran. I don't remember how I made it to the street, only that I left the building unlocked behind me. When I returned with help the next morning, the drawer was empty. The body was gone. The room was silent. I tell myself it's still there somewhere, waiting for me to come back, watching. Morticians talk among themselves, and I've heard whispers of others who've had drawers that won't stay shut. Maybe we're all just paranoid. Maybe it's the loneliness of the job, but deep down, I know the truth. I packed up and left the next day, didn't look back, onto a new town and a new job, slinging burgers in a quiet cafe in a small, quiet town. Weeks later, I read that the John Doe had been found again, this time back at the cemetery. The groundskeeper swore he saw the same pale face lying across the broken earth where the coffin had first surfaced. By the time others arrived, the body was gone, but the grave itself looked freshly disturbed, as though something had clawed its way out. After that, the town fenced off the far corner of the graveyard, chained the gates, and declared it unsafe ground. Morticians whispered about it quietly, but no one dared speak too long. Maybe they believed that sealing it off means the problem is solved. Out of sight, out of mind. But I know better. Whatever rose once could rise again. The dead don't always lie still, and when one starts watching them, it never stops. You've heard the Mortician's confessions of black ooze seeping through walls, zombie outbreaks, haunted morgues, and drawers that refuse to stay shut. But remember this, the dead don't rest easily, and silence in the morgue is never as empty as it seems. Thank you for joining us at Whispers After Dark, where shadows speak and the night listens. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss the horrors we bring every week. Explore our playlist below for more haunted nights, eerie campfire tales, and gothic audiobooks that linger long after the lights go out. Until next time, stay curious, stay cautious, and beware of the Whispers After Dark.